We're going to start our next session now, which is all about delivering Windows 8 apps, because it's one thing to actually get the desktop down to the user's device. What are they going to do once they've got their Windows 8 experience? And it's all about the app for me, really.
Yeah,
whether it's Fruit Ninja or Excel.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have a look at the ability to deploy applications and also Windows 8 as an operating system.
And if you've just joined us, by the way, I'm Andrew Fryer, and I kind of concentrate on server stuff.
And I'm Simon May, and I kind of concentrate on the desktop side of things. So app deployment and operating system deployment and all the VDI stuff we looked at, and all the stuff we're going to look at for the rest of the morning. Okay,
take it away, Simon.
So, as we said very briefly earlier on, apps are different inside of Windows 8. They run in a different way. They have a different deployment mechanism and a slightly different packaging mechanism.
So we need to just let me be clear here. We've got the applications that we traditionally had in Windows 7 that we deploy MSIs and
absolutely,
and all
which
that kind of stuff.
Still run completely fine.
Okay. And then we've got this new stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We have these new applications, and those applications are actually delivered in two different ways, essentially. The first one is from the Windows Store. So you'll be familiar with this already. You go on there, you go and download your favourite applications that you find in that store. So that's where you can go and find the likes of, I think we have Sky News, we have lots of applications from Microsoft, we have Link, we have Skype, we have blah, blah, blah. All of those kind of things. You go and download those directly out of the store, and they're all signed by the Microsoft Store.
But then it occurs to me that a business might want to write one of those new applications, and I know we've got a few internally here at Microsoft, and they want to deploy those as well. So they're a new style of applications.
Yep, absolutely.
And so we need to deal with that too.
We do. And that new style of applications is something called a packaged app, or a Windows 8 Store app, or commonly an Apex file.
Apex. We'll call them Apex from now on, so everybody's clear what we're talking about.
So when we deal with one of these Apex files, all the requirements for that application are all in one file, and it's got a .apex extension.
Right.
That file has to be signed by somewhere.
So I need a certificate somewhere?
You do, absolutely. Windows requires that that application is signed by a certificate authority that you trust. Now, intrinsically, you trust the Microsoft Store, so that's all certificately inside. There's an interesting point about why you should trust that, and we'll mention that in a second. But secondly, if you're in your own environment, you need to have trusted the signature of the application. So you have to have that in place in order for the app to run. If you don't, you'll be able to install it, potentially, but it won't actually run when you go into it.
So you could go to an application vendor, and I think I've seen some demos, say from Sage, for example, where they've written an application, an Apex application, and we would trust Sage's certificate for that.
Absolutely, we'd have to add that into the trusted root certificate.
Or I might have my in-house development environment. Maybe I'm a large newspaper or a bank or someone, and I've got my own house dev team, and in which case their code would be signed with the certificate I've got inside my business.
Absolutely, that would be signed by your enterprise roots,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, gotcha.
So we have those two different ways of delivering the applications there. This is lots of nice animation.
So side loading, I guess, is the business. We'll get the application from wherever. Much in the same way we might get a Windows update, and then we'll control the deployment of that Apex package through our enterprise to people who need it.
Absolutely. So you might use your ESD, your enterprise software deployment mechanism, something like Config Manager, to be able to deploy those apps. You might also want to use a couple of other mechanisms that are available to you in order to be able to do that deployment.
We don't actually need to go and buy any software to do that. We can actually do it ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to look at a bunch of free tools that you can use today, the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, in order to be able to do these kind of deployments, and also PowerShell, which is built into Windows Server 2012.
And obviously all this is just came out on Friday, so there's obviously some maturity needed there with some of the other third-party management tools to be able to do this new stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the deployment tools that you need in order to be able to do this stuff, you need the application deployment kit. That ADK, which used to have a different acronym called WAKE.
So it's just the new WAKE?
Absolutely, it is the new WAKE. There's also a bunch of extra features in there. So WAKE is actually a component of ADK now, and you go and grab that little piece out of there. The other components in there are really important because they allow you to go through an application and say, is this the type of application I want my business to be using? And that's the exact same kind of rigor that we put into looking at store applications to see whether they should go into the store. And those are the kind of controls that people need to be thinking about applying to their business. And the reason for that is that users don't want to have an experience which doesn't match the right metaphor. So, for example, say you have an internal application, it's your intranet site. Everybody's going to be used to using the charms in order to be able to do a search.
Right.
So if they want to go onto their intranet site and they want to do a search, whereabouts are they going to find that? You're going to want to be using the charms in order to be able to do that search, and not delivering strange extra app menus inside of that in order to be able to get through to search. So that ADK actually helps you to put a lot of that context around your application delivery and make it very similar to the same type of requirements for the Windows Store.
Okay.
So critically important, we follow that. We also have the MDT, so the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit.
Yeah, had that before, yeah.
Absolutely, people have seen that for years. Fantastic way of deploying Windows 7, also now a fantastic way of deploying Windows 8. If you're deploying with anything other than the MDT, so you're using some kind of legacy infrastructure to do that, you really want to be thinking about moving over to using MDT. And if you have Config Manager in that environment, you want to be thinking about using MDT in association with Config Manager. The two work together in order to do your operating system deployments.
But one thing to note here, as at the moment, System Center Config, System Center 2012 came out in May. Windows 8, Windows Server only recently released, so there's going to be a service pack to Configuration Manager and all the other components of System Center 2012, and that's not out yet. It's in beta, so people can download and try that, but we haven't actually got it out today. So you're going to need to wait for that.
Completely.
To play with this new stuff.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to want the SP1 version of Config Manager so that you can manage your Windows 8 devices and also to be able to deploy Apex package and all that kind of thing. You're also going to want the latest version of the Internet Explorer toolkit in order to be able to successfully deploy Internet Explorer and manage that really well. Obviously, it's the most manageable browser inside of an enterprise environment for the reason of having the IEAK and also for having group policy. Right.
Yeah. So we can set what people can do, what people can't do. Right.
Absolutely. Okay. So, in terms of what you get inside of the ADK, you get the Windows pre-execution environment. So very similar to what people see. Absolutely. Well, this is the environment that loads after PXE. So this is the Windows that you see before we have Windows installed in your machine.
Yeah. So it's hello, welcome, and all that kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of that stuff, all the drivers in order to connect to the network, do all that kind of thing. We also want the user state migration tool in place because the chances are that you're going to be swapping out machines where somebody already has some user data on that machine.
So are we going to cover anything about upgrade today? Because it occurs to me here that there are going to be quite a lot of people who are going to have their user state maybe in XP. And I guess I'd be surprised if we don't get a question about people moving from XP and keeping their data as they move to 8. Can they do that directly?
They can't do that directly. They do have to migrate that data off the machine and back onto the machine again.
Okay.
So that is a requirement.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. But the tooling will allow that to happen. You don't have to kind of muck about with 7 in the middle or anything like that. Or Vista or what.
No, absolutely. Okay. We can do a direct migration there because actually what we're doing is replacing the operating system, not doing an upgrade of it.
Yeah.
Which is always what we would do with MDT.
Okay.
So the user state migration tool hasn't really changed a lot. It allows us to hard link files that are in place. It allows us to offload those files to a file share so that we can do a complete replace of the hardware underneath. If we were going to just refresh the hardware, i.e. drop a new operating system on there, we'd use hard linking inside of NTFS using USMT in order to keep files in place and not have to go through all the time of moving them over to a file share and then all the time of restoring them back.
And can we use this tool to move that environment on a physical machine, maybe into like the world of virtual desktops and so on and so forth?
Absolutely no reason why not. You would probably want to think about using something like DistaVHD to make that enabled as well.
Okay, yeah, but it's doable.
It is, absolutely. Then obviously you're going to need to activate all of your tools inside all of your operating systems inside your environment. So you're going to want to use the advanced in order to actually put that in place, the volume activation migration kit. And also new inside of all of this is actually a whole bunch of performance tools. Because one thing that people really miss around Windows and when they're doing their enterprise deployments is they get very tied into the idea that we need to have all of this software on there. So we need to have our antivirus on there, we need to have our firewall on there, we need to have our X, Y, Z management software on there. And what all of that does is it actually slows down the performance of Windows a little bit. So if you think about boot times, for example, that can take a while. And what we recognise is that people need fast boot in their environment. So we've made various changes, so we run group policy scripts asynchronously, all that kind of thing. But it's also important to keep a really keen eye on what performance is like on your enterprise environment. And people are going to expect, just like they do at home, to be able to pick up their Windows 7 device and boot that in 30 seconds. They're going to expect with a Windows 8 device to pick up a Windows 8 device and have it boot up virtually instantly for them. So really enterprises need to be focused on making sure that those devices are still performant even though they've got their requirements on there. They want to have everything as performant as possible. That's what the performance toolkit is in there for. And
I guess power management, is that playing to this as well?
It does,
we're seeing very aggressive power management on laptops for long battery life, but also the corollary to that is being efficient with power on desktops.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to be able to make sure that we're as power efficient as we possibly can.
Okay. So we can keep an eye on all of that, even without using the extra value of System Center.
Completely.
If we want to, yeah. Okay.
And finally, we have the assessment toolkit, which helps you get through this idea of what do we need to have in place in order to have an operating system which should be deployed out into our environment.
Yeah. And does that help with the virtual world as well, or is it virtual desktop world? Or is it?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So let's have a quick look at deployment using MDT. we want to automate as much as we possibly can. So we're going to use a few different ways of doing that. We can either deliver a light touch deployment using purely MDT, which means that the user has to do some interaction.
Yep.
We could deliver zero touch, which actually requires us to use Config Manager, and then we could do something like right click on a machine in Config Manager, select rebuild, and it would go and rebuild that machine into the latest OS. Slightly simplified, but that's essentially the process flow. And the final one is a little bit more development driven. That's a UDI or a user driven installation where the user has to make even more choices, but you completely customize that experience for the end user.
Yes, they might boutique select certain applications. They maybe want some Adobe tools, they want some Microsoft tools as part of their build. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, completely. So loads of all of those kind of different ways of doing those deployments. We'll go into a little bit more detail as we start to actually build a deployment in a second or two. And then obviously one of the really key requirements here is the fact that once we've deployed the operating systems, we still need to be able to manage them. And it doesn't matter what it is, we can still manage all of this with very, very familiar tooling. So Windows 8 devices, we can actually manage them using group policy. We can manage Internet Explorer using group policy. We can manage applications using group policy. So group policy will actually allow us to say what applications can and can't be installed from the store and what people can and can't launch on their machines. And when we look at the requirements for side-loading applications, those are also things that we need to take a little bit of a think about for a moment or two.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, there are going to be some key requirements here. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got domain join there. So immediately I'm thinking, I can't side-load onto a Surface, for example. Absolutely. Because it's an RT device.
Yeah, so you need to have a domain join device in order to be able to do side-loading.
Okay.
Or you have to have the a product key which allows you to do side loading as well. That's the other way around that issue. There are some product keys that allow you to do that.
Okay.
You also have to have a trusted CA in place. And finally, you have to have the allow trusted applications group policy enabled. If you have it disabled, you won't be able to install trusted applications. So very important there, because one thing that group policy actually does do is it also enforces the certificate signing requirement. So without that, if you have an activation key which allows side loading, you don't necessarily have to have signed that machine with a trusted certificate. However, as soon as you turn that group policy on, it's going to enable that requirement and it's going to enforce it. So worth noting that.
Right, okay.
And let's just think very quickly around the ways of doing this deployment. Everything is actually underpinned with PowerShell. There's a couple of commandlets. We might very quickly take a look at those as to how we can deliver those applications down on a side-loading basis, or we can DISM install them so we can install those applications offline.
Well, I must admit, I prefer using PowerShell because I've got one command syntax, and whether it's looking at volumes or looking at virtual machines or what have you, once I understand my PowerShell, I understand my PowerShell. And DISM can be, how can I put this, arcane? It's
a little bit tricky in order to get the commands right. However, this is something you're going to do a lot of, so you're going to script that and you're going to get it absolutely right every single time. Not a particularly difficult
I'm going to get used to it, Simon.
Absolutely. Okay. And we also have enterprise software deployment, so MDT 2012 update 1, which will enable us to deploy Apex packages as part of the build. And we also have Config Manager. There are going to be other vendors doing exactly this same kind of delivery because they're going to need to. Everybody's going to want to be able to have Windows 8 applications installed. They're not going to want to not be able to take that capability.
No, and they're going to want to work with our ecosystem to make sure there's no friction there. Yeah,
absolutely. So the side loading process, what's required there? Well, let's think about this from the IT point of view here. We need to have it, as I say, it's signed by an enterprise root CA. We also then need to have quality assured that application, i.e. we need to have gone through and checked that it meets all the requirements. And finally, we need to distribute that application out into the organisation everywhere. So let's have a quick look at doing an actual deployment in this case.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued how all this actually works.
Far better to switch over and actually do that. So here we have a server, again, another good indication of Windows Server being useful here. On this machine, we've actually deployed one service, which is the Windows Deployment Service. We've done a little tiny bit of configuration of that service, which we actually had to do after we've gone through the next step. So there we go, Windows Deployment Services deployed out onto this particular server. If I just pull back here into my Start menu, you'll see that I have my deployment workbench. I've already installed the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit here, and I've installed all of the prereqs for the toolkit. It actually tells you what the prereqs are as you go through.
Which is jolly nice, yeah.
So I'll launch the workbench. None of this appears to have changed very much from previous versions, actually. It's just really quite a comforting thing to know. The latest operating system doesn't require you to learn entirely new tooling everywhere. Here I've actually created a deployment share. Pretty easy thing to do. We right click and do new deployment share. That then launches a wizard to take us through the process of doing this. And what it's actually doing under the hood is actually literally creating a share on the server where people are going to go to get all the packages from. Next, if we have a quick look at the various sections running through here, we'll start off with our operating system section. And in this case, we've actually added in 3 different operating systems. We've got the enterprise installation of Windows 8 in there. We've also got a Windows 8 Pro 64 installation there, and a second copy of exactly the same installation in there, just for some stuff we were doing earlier. So that's the operating system installed. We've literally gone into the operating systems, imported a new operating system, and brought in the full set of source files from the Windows 8 DVD or from the Windows 8 download.
Yep.
We'll cancel that. We could also drop in any particular drivers that we needed. So we've got these nice new Dell M6700s here. We know that they need some new graphics cards, so we would drop those graphics card drivers into the out-of-box drivers.
We've got those Belkin NICs we were playing with yesterday. Those would go in as well, anything like that?
Anything like that at all. Then in packages, we might want to drop in language packs. One thing that's which I found, which I think is particularly key, it does actually tell you this in the documentation, but if you're installing the Remote Server Administration Toolkit for Windows Server 2012, likelihood is that in the UK you're going to have the ENGB language pack installed, which does things like spells favourites in the right way, all of that kind of stuff.
You vetted all that, I think, didn't you?
I did, absolutely. So whilst that's great, it works everywhere there, actually the Remote Server Administration Toolkit needs to have the ENUS language pack installed on the machine. Because there's some just some language incompatibilities inside of that, so it has to be there. Sadly, hopefully that will get fixed at some point. The release notes tell you exactly what to do there. They involve installing a language pack, so we have the language packs available here. We just go to Import OS Packages, browse down to the location where we have those, which is on our E drive here somewhere, in this sources folder. That will find the language packs for us. I'll say next, it'll go off and catalogue all of that information. In this case, it's actually not in that folder, but it will go off, catalogue all of that information, come back, we'd hit finish, job we done. The language packs will be available to us.
Indeed, indeed. We noticed the Dell ones actually had Irish, I think, on when they shipped.
Yes, they did. Absolutely. Yep. So that was kind of cool of them.
English-Irish is now official as well. So.
We then build up a task sequence in order to deploy the application. There are 3 that I've built earlier. For a start, we'll have a quick look at this deploy Windows 8 task sequence.
Yep.
If we have a look at the task sequence tab here, it'll show us what we're going to do at the beginning. We're going to go and gather some information from the machine. We're going to go and do validation. None of this has changed much. It's all very much the same as it was before. But for anybody that's new to MDT, what we're going to do here is just check that certain things are in the right places. So do we have enough memory in the machine that we're going to be rebuilding in order to cope with the operating system?
So none of those limits have changed for Windows 8 anyway, have they?
No, absolutely not. Yeah. So I'm just going to cancel that. That's one that we built earlier. New in MDT 2012 is the ability to actually deploy directly out to a VHD. That doesn't deploy us into an environment that we can virtualize. It actually deploys us into a boot to VHD environment.
Yeah.
So a native boot off of a VHD, which is kind of a more flexible way I like to think of it as doing disk partitions. Yeah,
it absolutely is, and it actually got us out of jail. When my laptop died last night, I was able to copy that boot to VHD onto a new laptop.
Yep.
And it had everything in there. It was domain joined, all fine and dandy. All I needed to do was then go and find the new drivers on the new laptop, and that's how I got working again this morning when it completely died. So
that took you, well, a couple of hours last night in order to copy a couple of files, right?
So it could be really useful on physical service, actually, as a way of getting going there. Hardly any performance hit either. Sorry, just an aside.
So we've added in a couple of applications here into the Applications tab. If I just do a right click and do a new application, we can go in and add an application that we've already got. So I'm going to do application with source files. I'll click next. I'm going to find some sources here. We're going to call this Dynamics. Let's just copy and paste this information around just to make life a little bit quicker. Call it version 1, call it version 1 of the language. Let's drop in a source directory. So this is actually not on this particular server, so we'll just pop along to London. Oh, I can spell properly. London.
You can't type while you're presenting. It's a standard thing.
It is a very standard thing. So we're going to have a look at London 1. It's on a D drive on there. Previous. Go and browse that. Must be an easier way. London 1. In fact, let's just go and grab the thing from here. London 1 / D $.
So this is the traditional application we're about to go looking for. Something.
This is a Windows 8 application.
Oh, so it is the new Apex thing.
Yeah. So we're going to deploy this Dynamics application just here.
So there's that certificate I can see. Any CPU debug certificate thing there. Yeah. And then the Apex file above it.
Absolutely. Right, we've also got dependencies to deploy with this application as well. So this application won't deploy properly. We would have to repeat this for our dependencies. So we're going to go and deploy this Dynamics 1 application. Let's just pop the correct path in there.
Yeah, okay.
So next, that's then going to ask us for a command line to install the application. That is actually really simple. Strangely enough, it is just the name of the Apex package.
Yep, okay.
Which is in there. So we'll grab that one. And let's just drop that in. So that's our fully deployed application, ready to go. That's all we need to do. Hit next. That's then going to go and deploy that application. Now, in this case, that's going to fail for a couple of reasons. The first one is that we don't have the certificate trusted on our client machines, which is fine. And secondly, we don't have, we haven't actually deployed that completely correctly. We would have had to have actually deployed the dependencies along with the application itself.
Right.
So a couple of little extra tasks we have to do. However, that roughly is all we would need to do. We'd then go up to the deployment share and go and do an update, which would then go and generate the boot images that we would then copy onto the WDS server. So none of that has changed from
this is all the business of putting an application into our build. So they, as soon as the users get to a new machine, they'll have that Dynamics application in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start a virtual machine up here called blank deployment PXE. I should have connected to that first. It's going to need me to hit the F12 button in a second. There we go. So that's now going to go off, talk to our PXE server, and start to pull down our distribution. Whilst that's doing that, I'm just going to pop into our group policy management console.
Right.
And associate some group policy settings that I've made to lock out certain applications. So here you can see I have an app locker policy whitelist GPO which we've created. If I just go and edit that, we'll have a quick look at what's in there. So inside of the GPO we have a set of policies for computer, and we have a Windows settings area within that. And underneath that, security settings, and then finally application control policies. So application control policies is where we configure BitLocker.
Yep.
So this is, is where we configure AppLocker, not BitLocker.
Yeah, AppLocker was in 2008 R2, I think.
It was, absolutely.
We just extended its use.
Completely.
Yep.
So here we now manage packaged applications or AppX files or Windows 8 apps.
Now you've got to be careful with this, Simon, you were telling me, because as soon as you put one application in here, you've got to put an exhaustive list in.
Absolutely, yeah. You can either have a blacklist or a whitelist. If you go for whitelisting applications, only applications that are on your whitelist will run.
So there's explicit applications in here. Not in
Absolutely.
here, you can't run it.
Yeah. The other option is to use a block rule that will give you a blacklist, and then you have to block particular applications you don't like. So if you were to decide that you didn't like people running, say, Bing Maps, for example, you could go and pop the block rule in there.
But it isn't just and you've got whole levels of granularity. Sorry, we're going to see this in a minute, aren't we?
Yeah, so we have whole loads of levels of granularity in there. If I go into, say, the Sky News app, which I've actually allowed through this rule, we can have a very quick look at that granularity. So we'll pop along here, we can see there's some general information about it. We can see it's an allow rule there. Pop into publisher, you can see the name of the publisher. So this is actually the name of the publisher from the store. So it's a GUID that's generated for that publisher. We then have a package name that's in place, which is obviously going to be the Sky News app. And we have a version number. So we're going to allow anything which is above version 1 to run. Yep. These are very, very similar to the way that we did publishing rules with AppLocker previously. So there's nothing really changed there. It's just that they apply to applications in the store. If we have a look at one of these privately signed applications, so this application is signed by a publisher called Don S. Obviously, there's a little bit of an issue there. Do we trust it or not? In this particular application, what we're saying is anything that publisher has published, we're allowed to run. So what we could say here is anything that our corporate enterprise CA has actually has published, that can be run. So we would add in a rule for that, and we could block everything else.
So it's completely dynamic then. We just control the application distribution process, who can sign apps, and away we go.
Completely, absolutely.
Great.
So that's what we have to do in order to set those rules in place. We'll then close down that group policy there, and we need to apply it to a group of users. In this place, I'm going to be just a bit quick and dirty with it, because I know it's going to be easy. I'm just going to apply it to authenticated users, so everybody inside the domain.
And I did notice there was one thing I think you can do in there, is if you hit your OU, your camp users or whoever it is, Simon, you can right-click on it, a bit further down. If you right-click on camp users.
Yep. Oh, okay. Yep.
And you can apply a group policy update from here, rather than going around to all the camp users' machines.
Absolutely. Yep. So I'm going to hit the group policy update from there. I'm going to apply that. It's going to run off. It's going to go and connect to all of the machines that it can possibly find and apply that update.
So I'm liking that anyway.
Completely. In this case, though, the machine that we actually wanted to apply to is not a member of the camp users group. So that isn't going to actually have done what we needed to. Just swap back over to the machine that you saw earlier.
Oh yes, Alice's machine. Yep.
Which hopefully is going to be visible.
Yep. So this is a virtual desktop.
It is. We're just going to reconnect the screen again.
Yeah, we had a few wide-eye issues earlier, which is the streaming, how we wirelessly connect our display to the projection system here. That was why Fruit Ninja went a bit strange on us before.
It was, yeah. So hopefully that's going to connect in 1 second. You're probably seeing a wide-eye message at the moment.
Connecting, come on.
Let's take that away whilst it's just getting there, and pop back to our group policy. So whilst Andrew just works to get that working, our deployment is partway through at this point in time, so we're now going to just select we want to deploy our Windows 8 device. Say next. And we're going to actually provide a computer name there. I'm quite happy with the randomly generated computer name. Then we will decide that we don't need to move the user's data and settings in this place. This would use the USMT tool. We actually don't need to do that because we're actually replacing a completely blank machine here. So we'll say next again. We'll then not have to restore that data at all. Say next again. And then we can decide which particular applications we want to install. We could, of course, just like we can with any screen inside of the MDT deployment wizard, completely choose these options for the users in advance and suppress all of these messages. So in this case, I'm going to decide that I want to install the Microsoft Life app and the Fat Attitude Bus Checker app. We'll say next. We'll hit begin, and that's going to install that nice copy of Windows 8, completely clean, and install all of the apps for us. So we'll probably come back to that in a moment or two. Hopefully, we have a little bit of output from our Windows 8 machine. No, we don't, even though it's telling us it's connected.
Yes, we do want to test because obviously it's the live projection system. So, but at least you know we're doing this live. We're not watching a video.
Okay, that's it. So we're connected back in. So if I just pop into my my desktop here and I pop along and just do a group policy update, which hopefully I've got connected somewhere. There we go. This is going to just potentially ask me for a password. It may well not do and run through. I have actually elevated this command prompt in advance.
Okay.
Might need to. We may need to run that a couple of times. Go and try and see what's working or what's not. Obviously, we wouldn't normally force something like this through. It's going to take another couple of seconds to push the policy down to this machine. I'm going to rerun the group policy update again.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Obviously, being a demo environment, you'd normally want to not do what we're doing, which is going to thrash the bandwidth as you're refreshing your group policy all the time.
Yep. Just go and test again. Normally takes a couple of minutes before it kicks the policy into place. Andrew's going to keep refreshing that whilst we just have a look around some other settings inside of Server 2012. So one of the things that we didn't mention with this app locker policy that we have in place here is that app locker has to be enabled on all of our devices, just as it did in Windows 7 as well. So if we pop into policies and Windows settings, just as we did in Windows setting, we actually need to go and enable the service to run on those endpoint devices. So if we pop into Windows settings, system services, underneath our computer container, we will actually spot that we have, the only thing that's turned on in here is the application identity service. So we've actually enabled the app identity service on this machine. And that means that we can now deploy applications out and control what applications are deployed when they get delivered through the store or get sideloaded onto our device. So from there, let's just pull back and have a quick look at some of the PowerPoint that we need, sorry, some of the PowerShell that we need in order to be able to go and deploy an application purely through a side-loading process. So hopefully here's one we prepared earlier, this UEV test machine. We'll just dive onto here as Alice. And we'll start to see if Alice can sideload an application. So the first thing we'll do is bring open a PowerShell window. And from here, very simple, let's add a app into that. I'll hit tab. That's going to go away and have a look at the correct PowerShell in order to do this. There we go, add app X provisioned package. And then we can just provide the correct switches. Just go and hit tab. So first off, we need to provide a package path. So that's going to be London1 $D and then let's go and browse that in our case, just to make sure that Alice can actually see the packages. And in this case, she can't actually see those packages, so we'll copy them over. So I'm going to grab the Microsoft Lite application. It's a good one to use for this. Actually, no, it's not. The Dynamics application is much better. We'll copy that over onto the local machine here. We'll drop it into the documents directory. There it goes. Okay. So let's just change to /. There we go. Dynamics. Okay, it's just going to start to fill the path in for me very handily. And then we need to provide a little bit more information. So dependency package path for this one. So that's going to be the same thing again. Which is in documents, and it's in Dynamics, and it's in dependencies, and it's got a name. There we go. So let's pop back and just put the Apex information onto the end of the Dynamics application path here. There we go. Excellent. And just hit run. And that's going to come back and tell us that we don't have all the parameters set yet. So we'll just go through, work out what the other parameters are. And in that case, we are actually missing the license path. We'll just ignore that. So this is just not going to allow us to do this. And the reason is that it doesn't matter what we do, we actually don't have the rights in order to be able to actually install the application at this point in time. So the only way for an application to be installed is if the person is actually a member of the local administrators group, which in this case, Alice actually isn't. So if we just pop back and pop back to the start screen and run that PowerShell as an administrator, we'll see that we get a little bit further this time. So doing that just to demonstrate that even though users can install applications, they can't sideload an application without the required rights in order to be able to do it. So nothing has changed from that point of view. So let's just do the exact same thing. Add Apex package. Taking a second to find that command line. There we go. Let's go and provide the path, which is going to be /documents.
Thank God for tab ahead.
Absolutely. Obviously in a slightly different place now. So not /, it's going to be /users /Alice /desktop documents. There we go. Dynamics /. There we go. Let's add the right package in.
And this is why you use PowerShell instead of using a command prompt,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen.
So for the dependency path, that's going to be exactly the same place. Users /Alice
Dynamics
documents /Dynamics /dependencies /. There we go.
Rock and roll.
And in this case, it's now going to say no, and the reason for that is because it's telling us that we need to have done the certificate chaining, which is absolutely fine. We would kind of have expected that to be the case. So if we pop into our C drive, pop down to our users folder, pop into Alice Chow, pop into her documents folder, find the Dynamics, find the certificate. There it is.
Presumably.
Just going to grab that. We're then going to go and install that certificate. So cert.
Where do we need to put it, Simon?
Well, in this case, this is a little bit of a hacky way to do this, to be honest, because you wouldn't normally do this in a line of business application. Sure. But it does show you that this is it is a possibility in order to be able to get an application installed. We're just going to go and import that certificate into the trusted root certificate store. Kind of a hacky and very naughty way of actually putting the application in place there. Okay, we just need to browse to the actual certificate. There we go. Next, next, next. There we go. Now if we run back over here and run that same command line, it's still not going to get there. What we actually need to do is copy the command line into a new window so that we reload the certificate store. And then that application will run through and do the installation. So as long as those things are in place, as long as we've specified dependencies inside of the PowerShell, as long as we've specified the Apex path, got the certificate into a trusted position, then this application will go along and install. I'm just very keen to move back to the other machine and show you
so I think if you connect up there first and I quickly hit connect, Simon, I think it takes then. Hopefully, connected, check. Come on, talk to me. It says it's connected. Come on, get a move on. Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So if I go back into our VDI session, Simon, what I should now be able to do is if when I hit the games button here, I get the big heave-ho.
Absolutely, that's it, completely blocked by the administrator, so that's not going to get anywhere. We can, however, pop over and open Sky News because the Sky News app was available to us, so that's great. There we go, there's the Sky News app, let's get rid of that for a second. We can also pop into the store and we can select extra applications out of the store when it gives us a little view of that. There we go, so we can go decide to install the Skyscanner application, hit install, and Skyscanner is going to get pulled down across our internet connection. That'll be fine. We can go and install the eBay application. It's actually already installed on this machine, so we'll ignore that. Let's go and grab the Ministry of Sound application. Beautiful application.
Yeah, we can frighten the ears off the poor audience again. Yeah. So some of these have been developed in the UK by our colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Ministry of Sound is one of those applications. So good to see that it's headline on the store. Okay. So Skyscanner has been able to install.
Good. So I can just go back into...
Don't do that. Please don't switch away from the screen. And notice that the Ministry of Sound application could not be installed. So let's have a quick look at the reasons for that. So if we go to the desktop, the Skyscanner app will obviously go and run. We'll switch back across to our group policy machine here. Just have a very quick look at the app locker whitelist policy that we've got in place. Pop into preferences, pop into Windows settings again. Just browse all the way down into all of our settings. Down into application control policies, all the way down into app locker, and finally down into package app rules. And we'll see that the Skyscanner is actually allowed through the store. So we have already had a rule in place to enable that particular application to be installed because we thought that it'd be really useful for people to be able to go and use the Skyscanner application to book their business flights. Fantastic. We decided that actually their ability to go and install the Ministry of Sound application was potentially not business critical for this organisation, so that's not something that we've allowed through our allow rules.
Yep, okay, fine.
And that's a very brief walkthrough of application deployment inside of Windows Server 2012 and or more importantly inside of Windows 8.
So just to conclude there, Simon, absolutely essentially you get frosty with Windows Server 2012, but when you do, you've got pretty good control of what applications can be run inside your domain.
Absolutely, yeah. So the components of Windows Server 2012 that you need there, you need group policy. It has to be, you have to have the actual ADMX files to be for AppLocker to be able to control this. That requires you to have at least...
I'm going to say you need the AppX files. I think ADMX files are...
That requires you to move them into your central group policy store on your domain controllers in order to be able to manage them.
Sure. Or
to have Windows Server 2012 as your functional level because you'll get them automatically. The other thing you want is Windows deployment services, which you'll get from any of your any version of Windows which actually supports Windows deployment services. Completely the same deployment technology.